Let me just say this. Ontological is a question that says, what is real? Right? Epistemological is, how do we know it's real? Phenomenological is a term that describes we are the outcome of all the phenomenon that shape our lives. Right? Ethnomethodological is a term that means that we use categories to describe people and we act as if somehow categories are true. Right? Anti-disestablishmentarianism basically means the idea that we do not accept the establishment as it stands, and we're willing to flip it over. When I come in here on Black History Month, I come in a very unique position because I am a European American male who was raised in an African American family. And my view of the world is vastly different than a lot of other persons. Yesterday, I was getting on the bus in 104 because I don't have a car, as you know. And I looked up at the sky and I saw a beautiful blue sky. It's nice. Today, I looked up at the sky and it was a gray sky. Hey, come on in. Oh, hey, Amanda. Last night, when I went to bed, it was a dark sky with stars in it. Then, when I took a walk this morning, I looked at the trees, and the tree leaves were green, and the dirt was brown. And you know what was so interesting? People, when I was growing up, said, do you even see race? I said, I don't see race. They said, you can't see people. I said, I can see skin color, but I don't see race, because race is a social construction that isn't real in and of itself. And I said, here's what I don't understand about this concept of race. When I look at the blue sky, I'm not angry. When I look at a green tree, I'm not angry. When I look at a yellow daffodil, I'm not angry. When I look at a red rose, I'm not angry. When I look at the dirt, I'm not angry. So my question is, how can we look at a person that we don't know and get angry? How can we look at a person that we don't know and suddenly all of a sudden feel this anger and this distrust and this disrespect? I said to myself, you know what? It doesn't make any sense to me whatsoever. And the reason is, it isn't because of me. It's nothing inherent in the way I see the world. It is because of Mama Greene. Would you mind turning that up just a fraction for me? Right. Okay. Let's skip the song. That's right. The next song was supposed to be Lean on Me. Would you mind freezing that for just a second? Somehow the song that I wanted got frozen. I'll tell you to go ahead and move to the next one. Okay. These songs that you hear today were the songs that I grew up with. Every single song that's on this playlist were songs that Mama Greene and I listened to. Mama Greene, for those of you who don't know, was the woman who raised me. Mama Greene dropped out of school in the 3rd grade. She grew up in Blytheville, Arkansas. She was born in Tupelo, Mississippi. And the reason that she moved to Blytheville, Arkansas was simply because of the fact that there was a migration to Blytheville to cut down timber to supply wood to Chicago to replace all the homes that had been burned down when the O'Leary cow knocked over the fire and the Great Chicago burned down. So Blytheville grew because of the timber industry. So her family moved up to get a job. Now, Mama Greene, interestingly enough, was a sharecropper. She dropped out of school in the 3rd grade. The reason she dropped out of school in the 3rd grade is because her stepfather, the mean, abusive Mr. Dank, pulled her out of school because she had to wear a dunce cap in the corner of her schoolhouse. Right? And he was so ashamed that he decided that what she was going to do for the rest of her life was pick cotton so that they could have money for the family, and the other thing that she was going to do is chop down trees. If you ever met Bertha Greene, her hands were about this big, right? Her hands were mammoth. And as a matter of fact, at one point, she was a professional bare-knuckle boxer. She was a professional piano player, and she used to play by ear with her brother R.L., and they would travel up and down the circuit from Memphis all the way up to St. Louis, right? So here she is, this woman who had to drop out of school because her stepfather was so freaking abusive. Based upon, and one thing that happened that was really interesting, she was a fantastic cook. I asked her, how did she learn to cook? In 1926, there was a great flood in the state of Arkansas. And that great flood flooded 2/3 of the state. The people who lived on the west side of the Mississippi River were forced to move to the east side into Tennessee. And when they moved into Tennessee, they were forced to live in tents. And she lived in tent for about 1.5 years. And while she lived in the tent, her mother got hired as a maid in the hotels, and she got hired in as a cook. So she learned how to cook and became a master cook along the way. Now you can go ahead and play it. Now you can go ahead.
Go back to Lean on Me if you want.
No, I did the Lean on Me story, baby. No, go ahead and go to Everyday People story. You know what I'm saying? Okay, so with Lean on Me, turn that up just a little bit, just a little bit, just a little bit. So one of my favorite stories that I have never told in class was, I hate to admit this in public. When I was in kindergarten, I wanted to hate. It was in my heart I wanted to hate. The kids in my school hated people. The kids in my school would talk about people. And since I grew up on the east side, I grew up poor. I grew up in a violent neighborhood. I grew up in a single house or a single female-headed household. I lived in a neighborhood that was racially and ethnically mixed: Hispanic, African American, white American, Puerto Rican, Mexican. We were the original Rainbow Coalition, right? And when I went to my school, which was a private school, I went to an elite school. The kids hated people from the East Toledo. They didn't like us. They didn't know us. They didn't like us. And when I started to learn this issue of race, so one morning, I'm eating breakfast with Mama Greene, and I used to sit here. Daddy Greene would sit here. Mama Greene would sit here if she was sick, because she was cooking the whole time. And my brother Guy, Leo, Mama Greene's son, would sit here. So I'm about 4 years old, 5 years old. I decided I'm going to go ahead and show him something that I learned in school. So I get up, I start playing Duck, Duck, Goose, and I go around the table, black, pink, black, and I was all proud, And I sat down, I patted my chest, and I said, white. And I sat down and started eating my pancakes like this. And Mama Greene looked at me and she said, baby? I said, yeah, Mom. She said, what did you say? I said, I'll do it again for you, Mom. So I said, black, pink, black, and white. And I sat down, and I was proud. And she said, where did you learn that, Shawnee? I said, I learned it at school. I'm trying to learn how to hate people. I said, I don't like people with glasses. No offense, everybody. And she looked at me and she said, baby? I said, yeah. She said, do you love me? I said, yeah, I love you, Mom. She said, do you see these glasses? I said, yeah. She goes, do you love Daddy Greene? I said, yeah, I love Daddy Greene. She says, well, he wears glasses. I said, really? He does, doesn't he? And she goes, do you love Irma Jean? I said, yeah. She said, well, Irma Jean, she wears glasses too. I'm sitting here hitting my head. I'm like, okay, I don't hate people with glasses. And then she goes, does Daddy love you? I said, yeah. She says, does Guy love you? I said, well, yeah. And she goes, do I love you? I said, yeah. And she goes, then what does the color of skin matter? She says, the only thing you need to remember is that love permeates all of our life. Skin may be a color, but it doesn't define who we are. It doesn't define our character. And at that moment, when I was 4 or 5 years old, she said, baby, there's one thing I want you to know. Never hate, never judge. And never judge unless you have walked in the shoes of another. Go ahead, you can play. Right? And to this day, I continue to have that vision in my mind. I do not hate, I do not judge, and the reason I don't do either one is strictly for the fact I have never walked in the shoes of another person. Right? So when I take a look at that, I found that to be one of the most important lessons of my life. Now, some of you know me as a parent. I've dedicated my life to my children. Right? Those of you who have seen me with them, you know that Macy and Madison always come first. Some people call me soft. I like to think I'm borderline Herculean. Right? But I know I'm not. Everything I learned about being a father, I learned from Daddy Greene. Daddy Greene was about 5'7". He may have weighed maybe 140 pounds. He was also born in Mississippi. He lived in Arkansas. He moved to Memphis. Mama Greene, for a while, was married to a Negro League All-Star player named Freddie Bennett, who was one of the league leading home run hitters. He played against Satchel Paige and all these different guys. But he was an alcoholic and he was a gambler, and she could no longer stay with this particular man. One day, while playing the piano and traveling, she met Daddy Greene at a nightclub in Memphis while she was playing with her brother. And Daddy Greene became the love of her life. And so Daddy Greene and I, we were actually the two that bonded together. Everyone hears about me talking about Mama Greene. No, it was me and Daddy Greene that were the tightest. We were the closest. He taught me to tie my shoe. He taught me everything I knew about baseball. But the thing that he taught me was that masculinity doesn't have to be dominant. Masculinity does not have to be abusive. Masculinity doesn't have to be something that denigrates others. Every single day at 7 o'clock at night, he would sit me on his knee. he would feed me cheese, and he would feed me a banana, and then he would start to tell me stories. And one of the stories I always loved, I said, Daddy, why's your hair so thick on your face? He said, well, baby, I haven't shaved yet. I said, well, why haven't you shaved yet? Well, I haven't taken, he used a straight blade razor. And he said, I haven't sharpened it yet. And I'd feel his face. And around about 1973, Daddy Greene had had a heart attack. And he was sitting on the bed, and I said, Daddy, what's a heart attack like? He said, baby, it's kind of like this. You'll feel electric shocks flow from one elbow to the next. Then you'll feel something hit you in the heart, and you'll feel this electric just transmitting through your body. I said, oh, really? Didn't you have a stroke too? And Daddy Greene said, yeah, Shawn, I did have a stroke. I had a couple strokes. I said, well, Daddy, what's that like? I didn't know this was going to save my life 50 years later. I said, Daddy, what's it like to have a stroke? He said, well, baby. They always call me baby. I was never Shawn, right? So he said, Shawn, if your lips go numb or your arm goes numb and you can't lift it, you need to go see a doctor immediately. This is his favorite song. It was called Green Onions. So I took this lesson. He taught me how to be a man. He taught me how to be a man. More so, I only met my father once before he had committed suicide. So Daddy Greene was the man who raised me. And what's interesting about Daddy is that around about 1937, he made the decision that they were no longer going to live on a plantation in, at this time, Joyner, Arkansas, population 376 people. They made the decision that they're going to live in Toledo, Ohio. So he got on a train, and he took that train up to Toledo. And he looked at all the different places on the east side, which is where they settled. And I ended up growing up on the east side, which is very much like South Detroit, if you want to have an image of where I grew up. And then he came back down to Memphis when he had accumulated enough money as a truck driver, and he invited Mama Greene to go up there with him. And here's how they got up there. They didn't get on Greyhound. They didn't get on Amtrak. They got into a boxcar, and they rode all the way up to Toledo, which is how they got up there during the Great Migration North during the 1938 period during World War II. Don't stop it. Just keep on letting it play. So when all of this took place, they went to Toledo. Now, here's what you don't know. Bertha Greene was probably the toughest woman I've ever met in my life. She didn't play. When she first met Daddy Greene, they were in a bar, and she used to teach me how to fight. She said, if you're going to beat somebody up, you got to take your knuckle and you got to hit them right here. You got to dislodge their jaw, because if you hit them here, they're going to go down to the ground. Then you hit them in the diaphragm, they're going down to the ground. She said, if you ever get attacked by more than one person, what you have to do is put your back in the corner, pull out your switchblade. That way you can see where they're coming from every angle, and you just stab them as they're coming up. I said, wow, you for real? She said, yeah, it happened to me one time. I said, what do you mean it happened to you? She said, I was playing, me and her brother, we were going to play the piano at a club, and we're sitting there, and we walked in, and some white women said some very derogatory, my word, not hers. She had a mouth on her, and I won't use her mouth, but she said some very derogatory things to me, and I made the decision that I'm not going to let them get away with it. So I called them some of this, I called them some of that, I called them some of this, I called them some of that. And next thing you know, I was in a fight with 6 people. I threw myself into my back into the corner. I flipped out my switch, but let me tell you, Mama Greene always had a switchblade on her, and she always had a gun. She called her switchblade Blady May, and she called her gun Black Beauty. So she always had them on her.
Okay.
Right? So she flips out the switchblade, she throws her back in the corner, and as the story goes, she said, 6 people went to jail, or 6 people went to the hospital, but not me. But she had to escape. So they escaped, and when they left, it ended up not too long after that, they went to Toledo, right? There was one occasion where we were eating breakfast, and I went outside on the porch, and her dog was laying, his name was Smut. She didn't know how to name dogs properly. Smut, Bojack, Tweety, I was like, Toji, I don't know, what kind of dog name? Rennie? So anyhow, Smut is laying on the porch, and he's bleeding profusely. And I ran in the house. I said, Mom, Smut's outside bleeding. She said, what? And she came down, and he's in this puddle of blood. I said, oh my God, is he going to be okay? She said, yeah, he's going to be fine. Baby, go get me the castor oil. So she got the castor oil, put it on the wound, and then she went ahead and took some tweezers and pulled the bullet out of his ribs. And she said, come on, baby, let me go see something. So she walked. Her house was up on a hill, isolated. We lived in the ghetto, so she was in the ghetto, but isolated up on this hill. And there's this field over here. And tradition has it that she was Creole, African-American, Irish, and she was Native American, Cherokee. She walks over to the field. I'll never forget it. she gets down and she's looking at the grass. Can I say a bad word?
Yes.
Mine? Okay. So she looks down at the grass and she looks to the red house across the field and she said, that dirty bastard over there. His kids had shot the dog. She said, come with me, baby. She goes, go get my purse. Her purse, the purse that she had Black Beauty in it. So I said, okay, I got Black Beauty for her. And we got in the car. She said, come on, baby, let's go. I said, all right, let's go. So we drive around this block. It's about a half a mile. We drive over to the house. I'll never forget the scene. She knocks on the door, and this is her favorite song right here. She knocks on the door, and the wife opens it. She flips out her switchblade, and the wife is doing like this. The husband comes up. Hey, David. The husband comes up to the door. Now she pulls out her gun, right? The two kids are over here in the window looking out. When she pulled the gun out, they went flying. The wife drops to her knees. She's crying. She points the gun right at him and says, basically, if you ever do that again, if one of your kids ever shoots my dog again, I'm going to take you out. And I'm yelling from the car, don't shoot him, Ma. Don't shoot him. I need you in my life. Don't shoot him. She comes back to the car, gets in the car and says, come on, baby, let's go get some beer. So we went and got some beer. Now, I have to say that may not be a good thing. But she was a moonshiner.
Ooh.
She was a bootlegger, and she used to sell homemade brew. She used to sell homemade wine. She used to make moonshine. And she used to put, and my mom gave her permission. See, I never had, like, formula. She used to chew up the collard greens and feed it to me like a bird. And then when I'd have my bottle, she'd put one drop of moonshine. Not the moonshine, the homebrew. She'd put some homebrew in there, and I'd have a little sip. So as I got older, we would have a little taste on Sunday while we watched football and stuff like that, or Saturday. And which was a lead into a whole lot of other things later, right? But one of the greatest stories that I can recall is she taught me more about history than I learned in any high school, than I learned in any school. And this song right here by Shaka Khan reminds me of the day in which Hank Aaron hit home run number 715 on April the 8th, 1974. I can remember Daddy Greene was driving the truck, so he wasn't home. It was like a Monday or Tuesday night, the great big tornado outbreak that dropped 118 tornadoes in the United States. One of those tornadoes would have been an F6 if they measured that way. Completely destroyed Xenia, Ohio. He had just hit a home run to tie Hank Aaron on April 3rd in Cincinnati. Now it's April 8th. It's on baseball. It's on Monday Night Baseball, and we're watching it in her living room. And I love baseball. Those of you who think I'm a professor, forget about that. Forget about that. My mind was all baseball, basketball, and football. Back in the 70s and the 80s, there's nothing I didn't know. You all talk about sports now. Let me tell you what, back in those days, I'd take you out. As a matter of fact, I worked for the 76ers in 1987. I had a job offer from them, but I went to grad school instead to get a PhD. So we're watching this game. And the first pitch thrown to Hank Aaron by Al Downing is low and outside. Second pitch, he puts it right in the middle. Bam! Hank Aaron turns on it. He puts it over the left center field wall. And I used to be energetic. I'm not energetic anymore, but back in those days, I had energy. So I started saying, oh, Hank Aaron hit the home run. I start running around the house doing my thing. Hank Aaron hit the home run. I'm like, Ma, he's the greatest of all time. He's the greatest of all time. And I'm running. I said, where's Daddy? Where's Daddy? He's the greatest of all time. And I'm doing all this kind of stuff. And she said, baby, he is great, but why is he the greatest? I said, Ma, he just broke Babe Ruth's all-time home run record. She said, do you think that's why he's the greatest? I said, he's the best ever, Ma. And I gave her a big hug. She said, baby, that's not why he's the best player of all time. And now I knew a story was coming. And I said, why isn't Hank Aaron the best ever? She said, that's not what made Hank Aaron great, baby. She said, don't you understand? When he surpassed Willie Mays at 675 home runs, he started receiving death threats. Every day of his life, until he caught Babe Ruth, he was receiving death threats, not because of his athleticism, but because he was black, honey. And she said, because he was black, he received death threats, whereas white Americans didn't receive it. And she said, here's the reason why Hank Aaron is the greatest player of all time. One, he was able to take a look at the fear of death and confront it head on. Then he was able to continue practicing. Then on top of practicing, the other thing that he could do is he had the courage to stand when nobody else would stand next to him. When everyone was asking him to sit down, he said, I'm not going to sit down. I'm going to go to the plate, and I'm going to go ahead and keep playing baseball. And the greatest story I ever remember is learning about the Negro Leagues, learning about racism. Then she would tell me, because we used to go to Woolworths every single Friday or Saturday. Then we'd go to the nut house and get Spanish nuts. Then we'd go pay bills over at Lion Store. Let it play. So what happened is we'd go to Lion Store, pay bills, and all these kind of things. And I forgot what I was going to say. And we'd go downtown and go to Woolworths. And she said, baby, you see where we're sitting? I said, yeah. She said, this is where they used to have sit-ins. I said, sit-ins? She said, yeah, because black people couldn't eat at the counter with white people. I said, they couldn't eat at the counter with white people. And she said, not only that, they couldn't use the same bathroom. I said, come on, Ma. She said, they couldn't drink from the same water fountain. When I lived in Blytheville, Arkansas, when I lived down in Joyner, Arkansas, we had to get off the sidewalk for so little 10 or 11 and 12-year-old boys could walk by, and we were grown-up adults. I said, no, Ma, are you serious? She said, yes. And she said, you know what? It's ridiculous. There's no reason to hate people that you don't know. She said, and once again, she said, never hate, right? Never judge unless you've walked in their shoes. Sometimes, when she'd have dinner parties, she'd have 75 to 100 people come over, like Memorial Day, Veterans Day. And she would sell her barbecue sauce, right, which was fantastic. And then she'd sell her moonshine, and she'd sell her home brew, and she'd sell these homemade wines. I don't know if you've ever had elderberry wine. You haven't had wine till you've had elderberry, right? Yeah, if you haven't had dandelion wine, you don't know what you're talking about. Wild strawberry, wild raspberry, blackberry. She'd make all these wines, and all these people would come in from St. Louis. They would come in from Chicago. They'd come in from Cleveland. Some people would come in from St. Louis and come up from Memphis. We even had people coming in from Jackson, Mississippi for these parties. And what I loved about the parties was I was allowed to have a little taste myself. And I was a little capitalist back in those days. So what I would do is all these people, all these grown-ups would be sitting at the table, and they'd all have their home brew. There'd be people laid out in the grass. And I'd come up, take a little sip of the homebrew. And what I learned is every single time that I took a sip of homebrew, somebody gave me a dime. I said, oh, a dime? So I take a sip of this homebrew, take a little sip, right? Another dime, a quarter. Next thing you know, I've got about $20. I'm like, oh. But I'm a little bit juicy, you know what I'm saying? So I'd go sit by the stereo, and I would kick my leg up over my knee, and I listened to Higher Ground by Stevie Wonder. This is my song. This is my intoxicated 8-year-old song. So I sit there and start singing this song. Oh my God. Any of you remember Sanford and Son? Mm-hmm. Okay. So all of her friends, they'd say, hey Bertha, where's your little white boy? We need him to do the Fred G. Because I used to practice it. I'll be sitting around the house and I start practicing doing the Fred G. So, so all of a sudden they say, where's the little white boy? We want him to do the Fred G. I'd get up off the floor, I'd cross my leg, and she'd say, come on baby, they want the Fred G. Now imagine. I'm 5 years old, 6 years old, 7 years old. And I come in, I do my little heart attack, and then I do my little dance, right? And, you were crazy. And, oh my God, I'm on your line. And then I'd have to do the camel walk on. Right? So all of a sudden now, I'm doing the camel walk, I'm doing the Fred G. And here's the beauty of it. Now all of a sudden, they're not giving me dimes and quarters, they're throwing dollar bills down. Do the Fred G and do the Applejack. And I'm they're throwing all the money down. All of a sudden now, I had like $300 and $400 at the end of these parties. I said, hey Mama, when are we going to have the next party? You know, because here's what happened. Because we were poor, my mom would always say, hey baby, can I borrow some of your money?
That's a black mama.
Yeah, Mom, you can borrow some. I never got it back, but it's okay. I always had new T-shirts on and stuff like that. So that was one of my greatest memories. I used to always love that particular memory. What song is it?
Tell me something.
Oh.
Mm-hmm.
Now,
Fred G. Hey.
Now, Mama Greene would go down to the railroad tracks, and she'd bring the homeless up to our house and feed them. Right? Then she'd take them and send them back. There's a guy named Jerry who's on the back of my book, and this guy right here. Oh, I'll just show you the family. This is Mama Greene. This is my brother Guy, Leo. This is Irma Jean, her daughter. This is my mother. This is Mr. Johnny. Oh my God, Mr. Johnny. After Daddy Greene had died, which broke my heart, this guy started showing up at the house. He was a nice guy. I mean, there's no problem with Mr. Johnny. But he used to think Mama Greene was the funniest because she's always telling the next story I'm going to tell you. Every time she'd tell a story, here's how he would laugh. Oh my God, I can't believe it.
He was trying to holler at Mama.
Oh, he was. I caught him kissing behind the curtain where they had all the canned foods. I was like, what's going on back there, Mom? Oh, nothing, baby, nothing. So he would come in and she'd tell the chicken in the pie crust story, and all of a sudden he'd go, Bertha, you're just so ridiculous. I say, oh my God. I say, Mom, when's Mr. Johnny coming home? I want to hear him laugh again. So anyhow, that's him. This is me. This is when I was 10 years old. For those of you who think I'm like a fair weather Dolphins fan, and when I was 10, I had my Dolphins belt buckle on, right? This is Gloria. This is Guy's wife right here, and this is Jason. This is his son, Mama Greene's grandson. Sadly, everyone in this picture is deceased, right? Everyone except for Gloria and myself. Jason was a chef for Barack Obama. He was a chef for George Bush. He died of diabetes. He refused to get help. He didn't mind if he died. Guy died of kidney failure. Irma Jean died of breast cancer. My mom died of OCP, COP, the lung disease. Yeah. Mama Greene died of old age. And Jerry, the reason I bring up Jerry was simply because her heart was so big, she actually helped raise Jerry like she raised me. His mother enjoyed fornication and would leave him out in the car while she would go into these bars and meet men. And when I say leave him in the car, I'm talking about when it was 5 below, 10 below, 15 below, 0, with nothing on but his shirt. No coat, never had a coat. So Mama Greene brought him in, right? He ended up committing suicide at about the age of 32 or something like that. So when I take a look at it, I say, where did her heart come from? Where did this big heart come from? Mama Greene was brutally abused as a child, brutally. Her stepfather was a nasty, nasty man. He engaged in sexual assault, physical assault, emotional assault, everything you can imagine. And on one particular day, she was baking a pie for the family. And there were no screens back then. A chicken flies in through the window and lands on the pie crust. And it starts walking around. Well, Bertha was huge. She takes the chicken and she throws it out the window, and the chicken lands on the driveway and it breaks its leg. And the chicken starts doing this around in a circle, around in a circle, around in a circle, bleeding all over. And Mr. Dank comes home and says, Bertha, what happened to that chicken's leg? I don't know what happened to that chicken's leg. Bertha, what happened to that chicken's leg? I don't know what happened to that chicken's leg. You're a dumb M&F'er, and I'm going to tell you what, I've had enough of you. So he pulls out his switchblade, and he comes towards her to slash her throat. She picks up a cane-bottom chair, which I guess was very popular in Arkansas at the time, hits him over the head with it. When she hits him over the head, because she's huge, he goes to the ground, the knife goes flying. She jumps over him, and as he tries to reach, he misses. She runs into the bedroom and grabs a gun between her mattress and the bed spring that the grocery store owner around the corner had given to her because her stepfather had bragged that one day he was going to have to put her in her place. So the store owner, who saw the light inside of her, said, Bertha, you take this gun, and if you ever need to use it, you use it. So he's coming running into the room, and she fires over his head. Boom! She misses. Now all of a sudden, her mother grabs her little sister, who's just a baby. They go running through the cotton field. Then her brother says, oh, my sister's gone crazy. Arel, she's going to kill everybody. He goes running this way through the cotton field. Mama Greene takes a gun. Pow, pow, pow. 3 times in the back. Her stepfather goes down. He's rolling around in the same driveway that the chicken is rolling around.
Wow.
And as he's rolling around, I guess because it wasn't a long distance, here comes the store owner. And he comes pulling up in his car, says, Bertha, we got to go. By the way, Mr. Dank, who is her stepfather, was known to have killed 2 people himself in Blytheville. Blytheville was very much like a wild, wild west. back in the 1910s through the 1930s. It was unsettled for the most part, and all they did was cut down lumber for Chicago. There was gambling, prostitution, a lot of illegal alcohol, etc., etc. So she grew up in this environment. Yes, she had this soft heart. Here's what's amazing. Here's what's amazing. When she shot her father 3 times, her stepfather in the back 3 times, he didn't die, by the way, right? She said he was too mean to die. Right? He died like 10 years later. He had pneumonia, and she said he laid there for 6 months and wouldn't pass on there. Oh, can you leave us, please? And he wouldn't leave, and then he haunted the house, whatever. So anyhow, so the amazing part is that my mother was horribly abused, horribly. And they used to share stories about whose abuse was worse. Mama Greene was sodomized by her stepfather. She was beaten ruthlessly. My mother was ironed with a hot iron, right? If she didn't do what was right, she'd get ironed. She had to listen to my grandmother have fornication relations with my uncle, who was younger than my mother. And my mother couldn't say anything. So my mother got beaten every single day of her young life. She got the care and love beaten right out of her. So, I don't mean to put it this way, but a fact is a fact. My real biological father was a piano artist. He was a master. As a matter of fact, you've heard of Stevie Wonder. He wrote the song Ma Cherie Amour, right? And he used to play the piano and travel, and that's how he met my mom. And they got to know each other one evening, and here comes Shawn. But my mother wasn't prepared to be caring and had decided that she wasn't going to keep me. It was either through an abortion or through an adoption. And while she was standing there, Mama Greene made the decision. She came up, she said, Irma Jean, why is Susie crying? Thanks for coming.
Thank you for coming.
Right? Why is Susie crying? Oh, Mama, she's pregnant. She's not going to keep the baby. She doesn't know what to do. So Mama Greene, this is the story that saved my life. Mama Greene looked over at Susie, my mom, and she goes, Susie, let me tell you a little story. And she goes, if a female dog has a litter of puppies, but they have nowhere to live, that female dog will go find a new place for them to live, and then will go bring each puppy by the scruff of his neck to that new home. And you, my dear, if you don't keep your child, you'll be lower than a dog. But I know you're poor, and I know you just started a job. So I will raise your child for you. You won't have to worry about a thing. You don't have to pay me. He will stay with me. So I grew up for the first 12 years of my life with Bertha Greene, right? And that was perhaps the best thing that ever happened to me. It was the best thing that ever happened to me because on November 1st, 1981, my mother tried to murder me right in the kitchen of my own house. She woke up because all these other people had told her that I was a spoiled brat. Because why? Because Irma Jean went to buy me a pizza. When she didn't bring the pizza from Gino's, I said, really? It's a complicated story, but my mom was seeing this guy, and they were talking badly about me in terms of my sexuality, being homosexual, not liking girls, all these different kind of things. And then I was a star baseball player at the time, so everyone's laughing at me, everyone's talking.